Have you ever wondered why women were willing to line up at the door of just one man? Why even the most famous actresses in Hollywood lost their heads over him, knowing that by morning he might throw them out on the street? Today, we will tell the story of Jack Nicholson, the actor who turned his life into an endless carnival of seduction and scandal. New York newspapers eagerly savored his name and built legends around him, as if he were a mythical hero rather than a living man. Even then, Jack Nicholson seemed to Hollywood like a figure apart, and not only because of his films. His way of living without rules or obligations stirred the public more than the loudest premieres. Reporters wrote that any woman who spent the night with him risked being left out in the street by morning, yet none of them ever called that price too high. In his smile and in that hungry, sidelong glance of his, like that of a predator, there was something irresistible. Men envied him, women lost their composure, and however cynical it may sound, this very reputation was the best advertisement for any film that featured him. He had the gift of creating a sense of uniqueness. One glance at a woman, and she would believe that his attention was meant only for her. This talent could not be explained. At a time when Hollywood churned out endless streams of identical beauties, he stood out with his unpredictability. His manner, sharp and slightly provocative, blended with an almost impossible charm. And each time the press reported some new scandal about him, it only reinforced his image. The public wanted to see in him anyone, a romantic, a madman, an adventurer, but never an ordinary man. And Jack skillfully maintained that illusion. Thus grew the myth of a man who could shatter someone's hopes with a single move, and at the same time give the feeling of an unforgettable adventure. His life became a performance, and the audience eagerly followed every new scene. Anjelica Huston stood apart from Hollywood's glittering beauties thanks to her unusual habit of turning life into a system of lists. She made them for everything. Lost items, received gifts, handshakes, even kisses. This strange practice surprised those around her, but it gave her an air of mystery. At parties, her friends often teased her about her notebooks, but Anjelica smiled and said it was her way of keeping the chaotic world under control. One evening, in the company of friends, someone suggested keeping a list of conquered men. A joke tossed out with irony unexpectedly struck a chord with Anjelica. That night, Jack Nicholson's name came up for the first time. He was already at the center of the film world's attention. After The Raven, Easy Rider, and 5 Easy Pieces, he was seen not just as an actor, but as a true symbol of the era. Her friend Shirley noticed that he was staring too intently at Anjelica and advised her not to miss her chance. Shirley insisted that an experienced man was always more interesting than a naive admirer. To her, the fact that Jack had already been married meant that he knew how to treat a woman. Her words carried a provocative edge, as though she were nudging her friend toward the inevitable. Anjelica listened in silence, though deep inside she already felt that a new chapter of her life was about to begin. She did not yet know that this meeting with Nicholson would change her destiny forever. Her childhood had been shaped by an uneasy mixture of cinematic glamour and the cold shadow of family secrets. Her father, the famous director John Huston, spent more time on film sets or in the arms of his latest mistress than with his daughter. Anjelica's early years were haunted by rumors and half-spoken truths. Her mother died in a car accident when the girl was only a few years old, and for a long time whispers circulated that it had not been a mere coincidence, but a carefully staged tragedy. For Anjelica, Such stories became the background of growing up. She quickly learned to keep her distance, to hide her true emotions, and to invent her own way of putting chaos in order. Perhaps this was why she developed her obsession with lists, as if they could substitute for the stability she lacked in life. Her idea of marriage and family happiness was far from idyllic. She had seen her father replace women without a trace of regret, and she understood well that believing in eternal devotion was dangerous. When Anjelica first found herself beside Jack Nicholson, those childhood memories only sharpened her doubts. What truly interested her was whether he could collect anything besides fleeting affairs. The question she asked him when they met sounded almost innocent, but it carried an unspoken test. "Do you collect anything?" His answer came instantly, sharp as a slap. "Women." That was how the game began, a game in which each of them tried to set the rules. Nicholson seemed to know exactly what impression his reply would leave. He looked at her with that wolfish squint that made so many knees go weak, and it was as if he had already decided her place in his collection. But Anjelica was not intimidated. Calmly, she said that she collected not people, but men's promises, and perhaps that was why she was still unmarried, even though she was already 21. This unexpected candor disarmed even Jack. He leaned in too quickly, and their first kiss became the moment when Anjelica's list acquired a new entry, or rather, its very first entry. Until then, her notebooks had contained only objects and impressions, but now a man appeared on the page. She felt both joy and fear at once, as if she were stepping into an unknown world where her usual rules no longer applied. Jack smiled his trademark smile, like a hunter who had just caught a rare prize. That night, Anjelica decided that Nicholson would lead her new list, the list of conquests. And although it held no other names but his, she believed that soon it would grow. But Jack had other plans. He had no desire to remain a single line in a notebook. He liked being the first in everything, and before long he asked her to move in with him. This was the beginning of a story in which Anjelica hoped to find love, while Nicholson saw only the continuation of his endless game. For Hollywood, Jack Nicholson was already a figure of almost mythical proportions. They called him Big Jack, and he gladly embraced the image. Among the brightest stars, he had no rivals. Not a single actor could boast of conquering so many hearts. If he had lived in the age of Casanova, the Italian hero of love stories would surely have been overshadowed. Jack liked to say that one could not possibly embrace the entire world, but one should still try. And it was this very striving that made every glance of his feel like a promise. The papers relished spreading rumors of his affairs, with Jessica Lange, with Meryl Streep, with Madonna. Jack himself responded to such questions with irony, pretending that it was all just a playful game. The women who crossed his path rarely felt deceived. In his presence, each of them was certain she held a special place. Such was the magic of that famous squinting gaze from beneath his brows. Anjelica's father once told her that this gaze alone could lead any woman straight to the altar. And if winning another heart required marriage, Nicholson would agree. But for him, duty and responsibility were only empty words. His first wife, Sandra Knight, confessed to friends that Jack was charming and attentive, yet at the same time he belonged not only to her, but to countless other women. Rumors of his infidelity did not stop Anjelica. On the contrary, they only strengthened her resolve. To tame such a man seemed a challenge worthy of her character. Stories of women who tried to hold on to Nicholson soon grew into legends. Sandra Knight, his first wife, lasted only a few years in marriage before admitting that expecting fidelity from Jack was meaningless. For him, family never carried the same values it did for most people. He could be tender and caring, yet in the next moment disappear in the company of someone else. When Sandra grew weary of it, she turned to faith for solace and left, taking their daughter Jennifer with her. The irony was that no sooner had Nicholson found himself alone than his house filled with admirers. Women considered it their duty to console the unfortunate man, and getting into his mansion was no easy task. Sometimes actual lines formed at his door. But among them appeared a special woman, the Greek dancer Helena Kallianiotes, with striking eyes. She stayed by Jack's side for 3 years, but later claimed their relationship was more like friendship. To her, it seemed that he simply feared being left in an empty house alone with himself. Anjelica listened to all these stories with genuine curiosity. They did not repel her. On the contrary, they only fueled her desire to test Nicholson's strength. To tame him, she thought, would be proof to everyone, and to herself, that even the most restless man could stop for the sake of true feeling. When he suggested they live together, she decided to keep her distance and let him wait. To her, he was not a demigod, but only a man, albeit an extraordinarily dazzling one. Yet the longer their game continued, the stronger became the pull of that hypnotic gaze, which sooner or later she would yield to. Anjelica always knew how to create the impression of a mysterious woman. In her appearance, there was a blend of softness and hidden strength, and this at first made Nicholson treat her differently than the others. To outsiders, their union seemed like a miracle. The house was filled with harmony. Their conversations were light and full of laughter, and in their presence one felt the sense of a true family. The only visible contrast between them was in their choice of colors. Jack favored light suits, while Anjelica was drawn to black, as though emphasizing her uniqueness. But Hollywood did not believe in miracles. Whispers that Nicholson was still straying soon reached the ears of John Huston. The father decided to intervene and strengthen his daughter's marriage in the most reliable way, through work. He invited Nicholson to play the lead role in his new film, Champprise's Honor. John was certain that by accepting such a lucrative role, Jack would feel indebted both to him and to Anjelica forever. Yet this cunning plan produced an unexpected result. At first, Nicholson raged when he learned of his father-in-law's scheme, but then wisely agreed to participate. The film became a triumph. Anjelica received an Academy Award, and Jack was honored with a Golden Globe. It seemed as though art itself had bound them together. In her diary, Anjelica wrote, "With Jack, things are improving." But beneath the glitter, a new crack had already appeared. Jack's habit of vanishing at night, slipping away into places where his wife was not welcome. These sudden disappearances became a trial for Anjelica. She knew all too well that her husband carried secrets he guarded from the world. One of them was his daughter Jennifer. Nicholson hid from the press that he was capable of being a devoted father. His reasoning was simple. In Hollywood, tenderness was seen as weakness, and admitting that he rose at night to his child or played with her could damage his screen image. Jack had built his career on the role of a man with a dangerous spark in his eyes, and even his love for his daughter was kept under lock and key. When The Shining by Stanley Kubrick reached theaters, Nicholson's image took on an entirely new dimension. The role of a writer slowly descending into madness and hunting his own family was promoted as the most terrifying story in the history of American cinema. and the audience believed it. Jack seemed in real life just as unhinged as he was on screen. The actor himself only smirked, deepening the impression. The more people thought him insane, the higher his name's value soared. The atmosphere on set only fueled the rumors. Shelley Duvall admitted that she was genuinely afraid of him when he swung the axe during the chase scene. At first, Kubrick reassured her that the actor would not cause any harm. But when a rebounding blade accidentally struck a crew member, the prop was immediately replaced with a fake. The story leaked to the papers, and the public grew even more convinced. Nicholson was capable of anything. His own eerie laughter when asked about it by journalists made the image all the more believable. After The Shining, his career took another sharp turn. In the late 1980s, Nicholson was offered the role of a villain known around the world, the Joker in the very first Batman film. For the role, a mask with a permanent grin was crafted, and even Jack admitted that his own reflection in the mirror frightened him. The work was grueling. The makeup took hours, and the character demanded complete immersion. When filming ended, Nicholson declared he would never again play such monsters. But his promises had long since become part of his persona. He could swear to anything and break his word the very next day. What mattered was that the Joker brought him a colossal fortune, adding tens of millions of dollars to his wealth. Critics noted that audiences could no longer see him as an ordinary man. From then on, he was firmly associated with the image of a grinning monster. At the same time, his personal life with Anjelica continued. 17 years of breaking apart and coming back together again. In Hollywood, people whispered about his many affairs, naming actresses and singers, while Anjelica kept adding new entries to her notebooks. Among them appeared even Meryl Streep. A casual quarrel at a party revealed their long-standing connection, and Jack himself admitted. There had always been a sea of feelings between them, feelings that did not fade even after years of separation. Yet Anjelica chose not to write her name down, as if erasing it from memory. Deep down, she sensed that the real threat would come from another woman, one whose name no one yet knew. That threat appeared in the early 1990s, when fate brought Nicholson together with a young actress, Rebecca Broussard. Their meeting was pure chance, on a plane from Los Angeles to New York. The flight lasted several hours, the weather worsened, and the aircraft was shaken by heavy turbulence. Many passengers panicked. Even Jack whispered prayers, but the woman sitting next to him remained remarkably calm. At first she laughed, then she began to sing, as if to drown out everyone's fear. The contrast left Nicholson stunned. By the time the plane landed, they no longer wanted to part. At first their meetings were secret, but the rumors spread quickly. Anjelica was used to her husband's short affairs and did not give it much thought, deciding it was only one of his many whims. But soon the headlines hit the press. Jack and Rebecca had a daughter, Lorraine. For Anjelica, it was a devastating blow. She had never had children of her own, and the news caught her completely unprepared. That day, she quietly packed her things, left the key to the house, and walked away forever. 17 years of life with a man she had tried to hold on to ended without scandal or loud statements. The newspapers broke the story of their separation first, while Anjelica only watched in silence from the sidelines. 2 years later, she learned that Nicholson had another child with Rebecca, a son named Raymond. And although that relationship also eventually fell apart, Anjelica finally understood. Her place beside Jack had been taken by others. Anjelica tried to move on, but the habit of recording everything would not let her go. She began keeping a new notebook, filling it with the names of women who appeared at Nicholson's side. It seemed to her that in this way she still remained part of his life, even though she had long since stopped sharing a roof with him. Over time, the observation turned into a strange hobby. Her lists mentioned famous actresses, aspiring models, and socialites known only from gossip columns. She confessed to her closest friends that she was waiting for the moment when Jack would grow tired and finally settle down. But the years passed, and he remained the same big Jack who recognized no boundaries. At some point, Anjelica decided it was time to burn all the records and stop being a prisoner of her own lists. The gesture was symbolic, a farewell to her past and to her former self. But manuscripts, as the saying goes, outlive their authors. The papers found their way to reporters, and soon Hollywood learned of her peculiar habit of chronicling the names of women linked to Nicholson. By then, Anjelica no longer cared. She felt free without the notebooks and lists. In 1996, the press flared up again. Rebecca Broussard had returned to Jack, and they lived together without bothering to marry. Commenting on the birth of his new children, Nicholson said he was against abortion because once upon a time his own future had nearly been taken from him. That statement only added to the myth of a man who lived in defiance of rules, and it seemed that this defiance was the essence of his nature. The story of Anjelica and Nicholson became part of Hollywood lore. She was the woman of the lists, who tried to turn the chaos of her fate into neat records, and he was the man whose life always resembled a never-ending carnival. Their union lasted 17 years, full of contradictions, from outward harmony to secret disappearances, from shared triumphs on set to headlines about new romances. And so two destinies, so different yet so deeply intertwined, drifted apart, leaving behind a story that had everything: passion, pain, fame, and the eternal pursuit of freedom. A story that, even years later, holds attention like the greatest of films, one whose ending remains forever open.